What is up? This is the War Dog. Welcome to another episode of Comic Book Theater with my host and my main man, JR. What's going on, JR?
What's going on, War Dog?
Not much. Just another wonderful day in Atlanta. Beautiful weather, hot. Can't complain. We also have a special guest with us today, Dustin, a friend from many of the comic book groups. What's going on, Dustin? All right.
I'm not traveling right now, so.
Right on.
All right, so John, why don't you tell us what we're going to talk about today, and we'll get into the show.
Right on. Well, we've got quite a bit to go through today. One of the things we're going to touch on is the Game of Thrones finale. We'll get to that. I'm sure you guys have some good opinions on that. I don't want to spoil them just yet. Let's get kicked off with the Todd McFarlane returning to Spawn and the Special 300. Anybody who's been watching Todd McFarlane as he's gone on this road to 300 for Spawn knows that he's kind of gone the tribute route with 297 and 298. But he unveiled Spawn 300, and so, not a surprise that Spawn 300 is going to be an homage to Amazing Spider-Man 300. I think what did surprise some of us was the limited amount of variant covers that are going to be out there for that. Dustin, one of the reasons we had you on is because you're one of the guys that in the community knows Spawn, collects some Spawn, kind of knows the history of. What's your opinions on the 5 variant covers let me backtrack just a little bit. 5 variant cover artists that are going to be involved in that. Give me some ideas on where you hope some of the variant covers go.
Well, I just really, ultimately, you're talking about classic Spawn artists that he's bringing back, Greg Capullo, Sean Alexander. I just hope that they stay true to their own style, and bring us some of that great stuff that they've provided in the past. I mean, Capullo's your quintessential Spawn artist. Even Todd admits that he draws Spawn better than Todd draws Spawn. So it's like, I can't wait to see what he does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that was exactly how Todd said it during the release video, was that he's the quintessential Spawn artist. And let's be real here, Todd is not our Todd, not War Dog, but the Todd father. He's one of those guys. He's got an ego, man. Don't kid yourselves. He seems like a good dude, but he's definitely got an ego. So yeah, I'm with you. I think that I want the artists to be true to themselves. Now, so you named Greg Capullo, and he's also going to be joined by, of course, McFarlane doing his cover. J. Scott Campbell is doing a cover, and so is Jerome Opeña will be doing a cover. Jerome Opeña, he's been doing 7 to Eternity, so we kind of get an idea of what's going on there. Everybody knows J. Scott Campbell. Is there one cover that you're looking forward to more than the rest?
Well, I mean, really, the Capullo cover, set the Capullo cover aside, because that's Spawn to a lot of us guys that have collected issue after issue. I think the J. Scott Campbell one is definitely interesting. He's someone that's never drawn Spawn. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. Obviously, he does great work. We're all familiar with what he does. So I'm definitely excited to see that one.
War Dog, you have an artist that you're looking forward to them doing a variant cover for Spawn?
Actually, I like them all. But Jerome Pena, I'm a fan of 7 to Eternity. I've loved all of his covers. So I'm actually interested to see what he does for the Spawn. But, I mean, like Dustin said, Greg Capullo is like a must-have. J. Scott Campbell's a must-have. I don't know much about Alexander, but and McFarlane. I mean, you mentioned McFarlane. I mean, I see myself probably buying like all 5 covers. So I mean, I think they're marketing it the right way, you know.
Yeah, and with a landmark book like this, they're not going the way that that DC or Marvel have gone in the past with these landmark books and having, Lord knows, 20 different variant cover artists, a bunch of retailer variants, those kind of things. Now, I personally think that what's most likely for J. Scott Campbell is his variant cover, I believe, will most likely be sold through his website. So you'll want to keep track of it there. Um, Personally, I don't mind J. Scott Campbell's work whenever whenever he's doing just general art, that kind of thing. The thing that he's actually steering away from what some people actually like about him, which is when he draws women, he draws the female form, that kind of thing. He's going away from that with Spawn, which may encourage me to like it more, because this is one of the rubs that I have with J. Scott Campbell is. And somebody said this about another artist, and I really defended that artist because I don't believe it's true about them. But J. Scott Campbell, if you take away the color and you do a close-up of the face, you can't tell me which woman it actually is. They all have I call it the chipmunk nose, okay, where it gets colored more red than everything else. And so I'm not trying to dog him. That's his style. That's where he's made his money at. But I'm telling you, if you do a close-up on the face, you can't tell if it's Sue Storm. You can't tell if it's Mary Jane Watson. You can't tell. And I can prove that to you, but I'd have to do it via instant messenger because I don't have it where I can pop it on the screen right now. Anyway, I said all that to really say I think I might enjoy the Spawn cover the most of any cover that I've seen him do. So I'm hopeful. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for sure. Dustin, we were talking a little bit before we started recording. Only 5 variants. Do you see them doing something? What do you think the most likely on those variants would be, as far as not just the same 5? You think they might go a different direction and do like black and white or sketch variants?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to variants and Spawn, what I like, and you touched on it a bit, what I like that Todd doesn't do is he doesn't let all these store exclusives have cracks at all sorts of different covers. As one that collects every Spawn, or tries to collect every Spawn, I'm thankful that I don't have to look for 300 or 300s.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, there's going to be more than just the 5. I just don't see it. If you look back at 250, 200, 150, 100, even 125, you're probably in the 10 to 15 range of variants. So if each one of those artists is doing a color variant, it's probably got a black and white. Then you probably got some other obscure variant, maybe a sketch variant or something that Todd throws together in there. I'm guessing somewhere in the 10 to 15 range.
That's kind of my opinion on it too. I think the maximum, the absolute max that they would go would be the regular with trade dress and everything, a virgin variant, a sketch, and a black and white for each one of those. But I think that would be overkill personally. I really think that I'm with you. I think probably truly max would be 15. I think. Todd, you have anything out of left field where you think that they might go an entirely different direction?
No, I think I think you're right. They'll probably do a black and white on a few of them. They'll probably have virgin variants. So I mean, they're probably going to be around the 15, like you said. I think like the most disappointing thing in my opinion is just Matina had this awesome run on like these last, like 20 books. I don't know if it's 20, maybe like 10 or 20. But I mean, regardless of what you think of Matina, these were some hot covers. I didn't buy Spawn regularly, and then I started seeing these Matina covers, and I was like, oh, holy crap. And right then and there, I got a subscription, and I think every book that's come out by Matina with the Matina cover I've picked up. And you know, he also helped along the way, and it would have been nice. I know we were talking earlier that he's having people do interiors as well, and Matina was not an interior guy, but I still think I think he should have been represented in this one. Are there any other artists that you guys think that would have been cool to have do a cover?
Like in general, I mean, I'm with you with the Matina thing. I think that what Matina has done over the stretch of the last year and a half, 2 years that he's been doing covers has been phenomenal. And I think you're right. I think that it's brought greater attention back to Spawn that had kind of waned a bit. You know, part of me is like, this book, although for Image and for the publishing side of it, and the fact that it's an even 300 number is important to Image more than it's important to Todd. So I think Todd's book and Todd's mark is that 301. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Matina on 301 again, just maybe not on the 300.
Yeah, I'm with you actually there too. That the 301 is the important mark to Todd, to Todd McFarlane. As far as Cerebus is the all-time leader for indie books on a continuous run at 300. And so, you know, and Cerebus, I think we should at least discuss a little bit so that people remember. Cerebus was in early Spawn book as well, kind of as a tribute to somebody who inspired Todd, and you know, Todd McFarlane has talked about it several times that was something he had his eye on, was 301. So yeah, I absolutely see 301 being the one that he throws more behind. Now, a couple of other things to note about this 300th issue: it's going to be 72 pages. That is a monstrous book. Anybody who's rolling in and doing the Walmart 100-page giants knows that's a thick book. It almost certainly, I'll be shocked if it's not square bound. They may not square bind it, but if they don't square bind it, I promise you, you better be looking for that 9/8 copy of it, because those will be the ones that in the future will command a high price. 72 pages, you're begging for corner splits there at the spine. You're just begging for them. I mean, even just the double size ones get splits there. So word to the wise, if anybody is speccing on that book, I think that would be a I'm not saying don't spec on it. I'm saying don't go for anything subpar. That would be my recommendation. You guys have any recommendations for specs on it?
Well, have they mentioned the price point on this? I mean, I guess the first thing I would say is save your pennies, because it's probably going to be a $10 book. And if you want all 5 of the artists' covers, that's an easy $50 one week. So, I mean, that would be my one suggestion.
The price point, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Dustin, I believe the price point is $7.99. Is that what you've heard?
I'm pretty sure that's what he mentioned in one of his videos that I've seen, was $7. So it's still a pricey book, but yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that's a massive book, and if they don't square bind it, then you're kind of just hoping for the best. You may see a lot of shops sending stuff back because of damage showing up. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah. If you're getting it in a pull box, don't accept one that's subpar grade. That, I mean, I personally would not, just because, you know, especially if you're getting every single cover, yeah, definitely not. I would be. That's the other thing that would concern me about buying it from somebody like I. Full disclosure: I've never bought anything from J. Scott Campbell's website. I've never bought anything from him, but I don't know what the return policy is on something that if you get it in the mail and it's jerked all around and stuff, and next thing you know, you've got splits everywhere. You know, you kind of want to know that in advance too, if that's where they end up selling it from, because I would hate for somebody to be specking on it and end up with a brand new book that's not worth anything real, not worth the amount of money that they had in grading. They're going to be harder to press because they're that size, or if they're square bound, they'll be harder to press. Yeah, they're again, I'm not trying to discourage anybody, and I don't really think I could discourage anybody from buying this book, because I mean, gee willikers, it's going to be amazing. Um, I believe too that he is going to have Robert Kirkman and Scott Snyder both contributing for backup stories in it as well, which to me that's pretty freaking awesome as well. That Todd McFarlane would share the platform that way with heavy hitter writers and artists both.
So with Kirkman, we're gonna expect like an apocalypse story, or like some, like Spawn. All of a sudden, everybody dies, and Spawn's the only one left fighting demons or something. I mean, that seems to be Kirkman's flavor on a lot of the things that he writes.
Well, yeah, I would. Who knows, man? Who knows?
Any idea who
Trying
the
to,
villain's gonna be in that one?
I'm not sure yet on that. I have 296 that I picked up on Free Comic Book Day that's in my to be read pile, and I just don't know. That look, you know how it is. They could go any direction they really want to at this point. I don't have any idea yet. And I think it really did start in that 296 for the road to Spawn 300. And this is where I'm going to show that I'm not as prepared as I should have been for tonight's show. I should have picked that up and read it, you know, 20 minutes before we got on, and I would have a better idea. But how you guys know how to be read piles, they grow, and then they grow some more, and they get shuffled around too. So it's one of those deals. Dustin, if you're writing the road to 300, who would your villain be?
Well, I mean, yeah, I kind of harken back to your classic Violator. I mean, you want that sort of iconic sort of creature. I mean, even if it's some sort of reincarnation of Malbolgia or something, that's kind of what I would envision. But he's kind of leaving it up in the air. He's basically, Todd McFarlane's basically said that new things are happening in 300, but not really nailing down on any sort of plot points or anything.
Yeah, he definitely is leaving it up to the imagination. And look, that's where a guy like me, who's and I'm sure you to a certain extent as well, both of you to a certain extent as well, being Todd McFarlane fans, you guys probably won't go as far as I will. I personally believe he's the next Stan Lee as far as being a representative or an ambassador for the entire comic book community. That's who I think Todd McFarlane is. And it's because he does masterful things like promotion like this, leaving something to the imagination so that brand new Spawn readers, old school Spawn readers, people who haven't picked up a comic book since they bought that short box full of Spawn #1s back in the 90s, they're a little intrigued about what's happening in 300. We're not the only ones that are talking about it, I don't believe. I think it's going to be big news right up until they release 300.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with you. I mean, yeah, we talked about attributing some of that to Matina and his art capturing new readers, but yeah, I think that he's setting it up. He's saying, okay, well, you haven't been reading the whole while, so we'll start here at 296, and we'll give you kind of a brief update or get you up to speed with the big points of what's happened, and then we're going to drop this new product on you, and you can kind of just pick it up and go with it from there. I think that's a genius move.
Oh yeah.
In his one video, he also mentioned that 300 and 301 are going to be big issues. So I got to imagine 301 or 300 may even set up something new, like a cameo, where 301 is a whole new character. I'm kind of hoping for that. See a little bit something new with this with the whole Spawn book.
Yeah, I think you're right on too. I think that's the way it's going to be. Everything that I hear from Todd McFarlane is that 301's the more important issue to him and probably to the series. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I absolutely that, and like we said, 301 is the record breaker, 300 is the tie, and really for the collectors is more, it's decorating the cake. You know what I mean? That everybody knew that 300 was coming, that the homage was coming. Now, when he released the pencils, he was sketching the pencils in a live sketch or in a live video through social media for 297 well over a month ago, 2 months ago, whatever. And as soon as I saw him drawing the blast lines, whatever, coming out, I'm like, if you don't know what that is, I can't really help you. That if you don't know that that's an homage to Amazing Spider-Man 297, I just don't know where to begin to try to help you figure that out. Now, and really, I don't think that we could talk about Spawn without talking a little bit about how important Amazing Spider-Man was to Todd's career. That's where he became the rock star comic book artist. You don't get to Spawn if he doesn't do Amazing Spider-Man first, and I think he's paying tribute to that quite well.
Yeah, I mean that's what put him on the map. Obviously, then he was able to start demanding stuff of the studio versus the studio demanding stuff of him. And that's how we got the Spider-Man run that he had, and that's how ultimately Image began, basically. So
oh yeah, for sure. We all, he has a storied history of creators' rights going back to Marvel, and so I highly recommend to anybody, if you haven't checked it out, there is a series on, I believe it's on YouTube now, but I think it was through Sci-Fi, about Image Comics, and it was like a 4 or 6 part series, and they're like 40-minute episodes. And man, I'm telling you what, they go all the way through from the very beginning to to modern times, just about. Highly recommend. I can't recommend it enough, honestly, to go watch that, because I think it gives you insight into what was going on at Image at that point, where they just, they knew who they were, they knew what kind of value they brought to the table, and they were kind of tired of of being, you know, second best or treated as second best when their talent and their sales were above any before them, you know. Todd, I'm going to ask you here, man. I'm kind of branching this out into the whole Image universe. Is there an Image title that you that you would that you would consider going back and collecting if you had, you know, if you'd started right back in the 90s, you know, you right now you are back in the 90s, Images starts up. What title are you thinking you would start collecting?
Well, how many of them have lasted? I mean, that's one of the most amazing things about Spawn 300. I mean, you know, Brigade. I remember Brigade, Youngblood. I mean, those all didn't last, you know, anywhere close to Spawn. I mean, so I don't know. Like going back, aside from Spawn, I don't know which other one I would go for. You know, if we were talking modern, I never picked up Saga, and everybody keeps talking about how awesome Saga is. I wish I would have picked that one up. And I know, like, issue #1 of Saga is pretty expensive, you know, but I am happy. I mean, Image does do some cool things like Redneck. I'm really digging Redneck. You know, I'm on the Spawn train now. Gideon Falls by Jeff Lemire. I mean, they've got some good stuff, and they have a nice little niche in the market. I like how they kind of differentiate and do things a little bit differently. What's kind of shocking is the fact that, like, Spawn is just a one character universe, really. I mean, like, they didn't think of branching out into, oh, well, let's make another comic where these characters interact with Spawn. I mean, Spawn kind of is driven on his own.
He is driven on his own. But I will say, like, Sam and Twitch is a side, like a spin-off book. He's crossed over a couple of times with he's got a crossover with Batman that was written by Frank Miller. That was, by all accounts, a good book. He's also crossed over with Savage Dragon a time or two. So Spawn has crossed over somewhat, but not you're right, not a great deal, not as much as somebody like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles would have, you know, that kind of thing. I'm trying to think here of where else he's crossed over with.
Well, the thing is like Spawn's like the Batman, right? Kind of.
Right.
So you would think that somebody would have come along and made the Superman, the Green Lantern, the Wonder Woman, the Flash, and then they build this whole big universe. It's cool, but it would have been interesting to see if they would have built on this whole universe. Even Venom, I would have liked to see Venom, but I can't get enough Venom. So,
Dustin,
I think the reason why we don't see that universe with Spawn really has to do with Todd McFarlane and his, how to put it politely, lack of ability to develop those sort of characters. You know, if Todd McFarlane had this backlog of characters and character story ideas that he'd had his whole life, I think he would have offshooted those things and maybe tried to do that. But he's been so focused on just the art and on this one specific character that he developed when he was a teenager that I just don't think he has that in him or the desire to pursue that aspect of it.
Yeah, and really it is a rich world as far as that goes, but like, you know, kind of like Todd saying, there's not a Justice League type situation there, or an X-Men type situation where he could team up or ever have a sidekick. You know, those kind of things just aren't really. That's not Spawn. You know,
it doesn't go with the character's motif to do those sort of things.
Right. I think if my memory serves me correctly, that Todd has basically kind of said that, you know, while the art does not necessarily reflect it in like Al Simmons or his wife Wanda, it's kind of like Wanda was modeled after Todd McFarlane's wife. That's kind
Absolutely.
of the way he wrote it, which kind of implies that Al Simmons is kind of more Todd a little bit, just the really, really dark, messed up, murdery side of Todd. That, you know, that kind of thing. Um, Again, that's maybe me reading too much into it, but as War Dog will tell you, I tend to do that once in a while. I read a little bit too much into it.
It's funny that you say that, because one of my friends was talking to me. Since I wrote this one comic, I have a bunch of people that send me messages, and they're telling me all their ideas of the comics that they want to write. And the one suggestion that I tell them is, like, at least from my perspective, is make your main character like yourself, and then make the people that you interact with people that are recognizable in your life. And it becomes a lot easier to write that story, because your main character is basically, you're just acting it out. Of course, you know, you're gonna take a different side of yourself, or imagine yourself in a different, you know, scenario. But then, like, your friend is, you know, Chewbacca is Bishop, I guess, in my case, you know, or something like that. And it really helps and makes it a little bit easier to write the story. And Dustin, I know Dustin's working on a story with Rabid Rhino Comics. How's that coming along, Dustin?
No, I'm right there with you. I mean, my inaugural story it's kind of mirroring myself. You know, it's you know, well, basically it's an Army veterinarian, which I am, that, you know, has some powers and, you know, does these things. So I mean, you're right. I mean, it's taking stuff out of your own life and incorporating in the story. And obviously, Todd McFarlane's done that as well. I mean, Al Simmons was his college roommate. You know, his daughter's name is in the book. His wife's name is in the book. So it's like, you know, you draw these things out of your real life experience, and then you, at least with that first book, at least in my experience with that first book, you get to see how it lays out, and then you can branch off in other directions from there, you know.
Right on. So real quick, since we're on your label here, are you going the route of the Kickstarter to get your book going, or are you going to try more the traditional route with that?
Well, I will likely do a Kickstarter to start, just because I'm active duty military. I don't have a lot of time to jump through all the hoops that the publishers and stuff want to get done. And from what I've read about trying to get stuff in Diamond and all those sort of things, I don't think that I have time to dedicate to that. So I'm taking it slow. I am looking at. I have been approached, I'm sure, as Todd's been approached, by a number of people. So I'll likely, the first thing that comes out of Rabid Rhino Comics will likely not be my comic. I have other writers that I'm working on putting their stuff out, and another writer and artist team that I'm working on putting stuff out for. So we'll see how it all goes. I'm taking it slow, trying to do things right, trying to do things at my pace, because I don't have a ton of time for it all. But yeah, it's fun so far. It's in its infancy, you know, baby stuff right now.
It's like I tell collectors who are brand new to collecting, we all start somewhere. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? You've got to have you got to start with what you know, and then progress as you can. And like you say, taking it at your own pace, that's good, because I mean, let's be honest, there are plenty of pro writers and artists that never get that concept down of, can I meet this deadline? If I can't, what do I do to meet this deadline? Is it reasonable to expect me to meet this deadline? You know, those kind of things. You know, that's good stuff, though. Todd, we're talking about Kickstarters here. I don't want to run off the rails too far, but the crew Kickstarter is up to 3808 right now. That's got to be encouraging for you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's great. It's as I sent Jason a message today, and I said we might have to start thinking about printing up those stickers. So hopefully we get to 4,000. We could add some stickers to it. I really, what my hope is that one of the comic book publishers reads this and says, "Hey, this is kind of cool. They actually did well on a Kickstarter. Let's pick this up." Because the one problem with Kickstarter is it's expensive, and it's a low volume. And so, people might ask, why does it cost so much? It's because you got to pay all these people and only produce 100 books, and all the expenses get spread over 100 books. It's tough, and I've never wanted to exploit my friends or take advantage of my friends. I love everybody that has taken a look at it, or even just mentioned it as a link. I was really praying it would be $150 with Alterna, but they said it didn't fit their catalog, which is cool. And I did submit it to other publishers. It's just I kind of got the same thing back, is it doesn't fit their catalog. But the cool thing is I got responses. I mean, when I got the one from Image Comics in their write-up, they say that don't expect to even get a response. We're so busy. So when I got a response back from them, I felt like, okay, well, maybe this is halfway decent,
Well, yeah, I mean, at least they read it.
Yeah, exactly.
At least someone read it or thumbed through it enough to realize, okay, it's not what we do. So,
the guy that responded, his name was Todd McFarlane. So, you can't complain about that. I'm just kidding. I wish it was that. It was a recognizable name, but I can't think of what it is off the top of my head.
Now, really though, to be fair to Dustin, I do want to let you know you actually were our second choice for this week's podcast. I did, in fact. Todd will attest. I sent him a screenshot. I'm like, what's the worst that could happen? I'm gonna instant message Todd through Facebook. If he answers, even I'll be shocked. And so I did, he's not going to reply to me. There's no way. If you know what, if he even looks at it in the next year, I will be shocked. I doubt that anybody ever checks his instant messenger through Facebook. So yeah, that was a big fail on my part. But so far so good.
I'll be second fiddle to the Todd father. That's all
right. Right on. Well, and honestly, for our next topic, I'm not sure whether Todd would be a better fit for the conversation. You know what I mean? I think that maybe you'll be the guy that to carry this conversation. Now we're going to kind of switch over here and start talking about this Game of Thrones finale that happened. And so if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you saw the finale. In the interest of full disclosure, I have literally never seen a full episode of Game of Thrones. Not ever. I have the most minuscule knowledge about it at all, to the point Dustin will attest to this, that whenever I was talking to him about being on, I said, could you talk about Game of Thrones with Todd and kind of help us out there, because I don't know anything. I said, basically, I see the memes and they kind of go over my head a little bit, because I'm sure they're hilarious to Game of Thrones fans. They're a little funny to me, but I don't know. I don't know the characters. But Dustin, you're a reader of the books and a watcher of the show, yes?
Yes, I am.
So, and Todd, you were a show watcher, or were you a book reader too?
I haven't read the book. Actually, I I put off the show for a long time, and then one of my friends brought in. He had the first 4 seasons on DVD. You know, it was one of those point in times where I watched everything on Netflix that I wanted to watch. He gave me those 4 DVDs, and I'm like, yeah, what do I got to lose? Everybody seems to like this. I popped them in. I'll tell you, I mean, such a great story. I thought like I'd have no interest in Game of Thrones because I like historical type stuff, and you know, there's not really a historical tie into this. It's a fictional story, but it was so well written, so well done, so well produced. I mean, like the Lord of the Rings on a TV show, and the drama. I mean, no character. You couldn't fall in love with any character because you didn't know if they'd be on the show the next week, you know? And then the ones that you hated in the beginning, at the end, you were like, oh man, he's got to make it. I mean, I guess, you know, you've probably seen Tyrion Lannister, who is played by I don't know the proper terminology, the shorter dude that plays Tyrion Lannister. I mean, in the beginning, he was a complete jerk. By the end, he was my favorite character, you know, and I'm sure Dustin can attest to this too. I mean, Dustin, what were your thoughts? I'm trying to convince John that he needs to watch this. What are your thoughts to convince him to watch this?
Well, I mean, you're kind of nailing it there. It's this epic story where, you know, you start out with season 1 and you build this relationship with Ned Stark, and you're like, this is my man here. And then at the end of the season, that's all ripped away from you. And that's kind of the way it went throughout the whole run of it. And and as you read the books too, it's very similar. And it's just constantly, you know, you're rooting for somebody and then they're dead. Or you're rooting against somebody and they just keep living.
Yep.
So basically, you're saying you have to be a glutton for punishment to watch this show. Is that
pretty much? And that's kind of the way it ended too. So if you're looking for a happy ending, you're not finding that.
So now I have read that George Romero, or I'm sorry, George Martin, excuse me, is going to be finishing the books up and is promising a different ending from the show. Have you guys seen that, or what do you guys expect for him finishing the books up?
I expect there to be a different ending. There's so many more characters in the book that never actually made the show that there's other storylines that need to be tied up in the books, which is easy to happen. There's 2 books left, some 700 to 900 pages worth of writing that still needs to be, you know, published. So a lot is going to still happen. And yeah, I'd imagine there being some differences. I think the last tweet, or last time he answered that question, was, you know, the question was, is the final going to be the same in the books? And he's like, yes and no and yes and no and yes and no and yes and no. So I mean, it's gonna be what he's gonna want for it ultimately, and what fans want for it. I don't think he obviously doesn't care too much about what fans think because he's put this book off for a decade now. So
right. So real quick, the controversy and the reason that we're talking about this, and again, I've not seen the finale. Was it disappointing to fans, or was it? And if it was just disappointing, why was it disappointing? Like give me some for instances on why it was disappointing, because just being disappointing is not enough for me to fully understand why.
So what I'll say is, I don't think that personally, for me, the ending was disappointing. I think the whole season, the build up to the finale, was disappointing because you had to rush through, you know, these character transitions. All these characters go through transitions. Usually these transitions go through a full 10 episode season or multiple seasons. But this season, you just had to go through these character transitions like rapid fire. A character like Daenerys goes into her madness, which, you know, it's preluded through the series earlier, but not to the point where one episode she's acting this way, and then the next episode she's at the start of it, she's completely different. So, you know, things like that were disappointing. And, you know, I mean, there are plots that they weren't able to develop, like Varys. If you're not paying attention, you're not understanding why this character you've fallen in love with is getting torched by Daenerys' dragon when he's supposed to be with her. Obviously, he's trying to go behind her back and let everyone know that Jon Stark's the rightful heir of the throne. But if you're not paying attention, you miss the fact that he's trying to poison her, because you only see a snippet of one of his little minions coming in talking about how Daenerys isn't eating and that they're going to keep trying. So if you're not paying attention to that, then you miss that aspect of why he was put to the torch. You know, why Tyrion turned on him.
Maybe a little too much nuance. Is that what you're saying to it?
Yeah, and, you know, I mean, you could have developed that story if you have a 10 episode season for your final season, but because you're jamming it into 7 episodes, then you just don't have that time to develop that storyline at all.
Yeah, the story, like the first probably 4 seasons that I watched on DVD, everything happened over an extended period of time. I mean, like, you know, this kid Joffrey was the king, and I mean, it was 2-3 episodes before Joffrey met his, or not episodes, seasons before Joffrey met his demise. Now, this end half, if Joffrey was in this end half, he would have been dead after 4 episodes. They spent so much time in the beginning developing this whole story, and then as they got to the end, it was almost like they just were like, let's get this over with. That's kind of how it felt to me. It was like, we've told this great story, it's got to end, and let's just end it and be done with it. I think it was really, in a way, I think it was bad marketing. I don't know if the ratings went down, but I mean, I think HBO could have milked this for another 10 episodes on top of this. Also, like, at the end of the last season, they broke through this giant wall with this dragon that was turned evil, and you expected, like, I mean, I was so looking forward to this season and seeing a whole bunch with this dragon, and I mean, it really came down to just one episode, like 15 minutes of this one episode where you saw this, and it was like, you kind of wasted that. But I mean, I think generally, my opinion is it was just a little bit rushed. And, you know, I'm a big fan of Lost. I'm a big fan of Dexter. And I guess, you know, every show, people get disappointed with the ending. And it might just be the fact that we loved it so much that we hate to see it end. I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well,
yeah,
I was. Go ahead. Go ahead, Dustin. You're fine.
Say you're talking about you know, the ratings and stuff, and I do know that the season finale of Game of Thrones was the most watched HBO show in the history of HBO. So that's something pretty impressive. But yeah, I mean, along, you know, I hate to beat the dead horse, but you know, we're talking about one episode where you're fighting the Night King that has been built up for 6, 7 seasons or whatever it was before that episode comes about, and then it's all over in the one episode. You're like, well, that was okay, a little anticlimactic. I mean, you know, and you kept expecting Jon Snow to have some sort of destiny, some sort of reason as to why he's still alive. I mean, ultimately, you could say that killing Daenerys was the reason, but you really wanted to see that Night King Jon Snow battle. I'm fine with Arya killing him because I'm a huge Arya fan, and I think it fits the story. But you know, Jon, even if we go to the last episode, where's that Jon battle that you're expecting throughout this whole season? I mean, it could have been Grey Worm. It should have been Grey Worm. You know that he's, after he gets done killing Daenerys and walks back to the Unsullied and says Daenerys is dead, they're not just going to be, okay, well, let's lock you up. That's not going to happen, especially with Grey Worm. So, yeah, there are frustrations, but I think ultimately how it all wrapped up, I'm okay with it.
I agree with you on that whole Grey Worm thing. I mean, Grey Worm is cutting people's throats, and Jon Snow doesn't like it. Then he's named the Minister of Defense, right? But he allows Jon Snow to just go walking into the Queen. And, I mean, somebody said, well, Drogon was supposed to be protecting him, but Jon Snow was riding on a dragon just a few episodes before. So, I mean, obviously the dragons don't have anything against Jon Snow. I really think, what really comes to mind is Star Wars Episode 1, where Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan come in with Darth Maul, and they had that epic battle. That's what I would have seen, Grey Worm and Jon Snow having an epic battle, and at the end, maybe a sword gets thrown and Daenerys dies. I mean, it could go any way. But, I think that was missing in that. That was one of the disappointing things. And, I mean, you're in the military. I mean, if you were the chief guy of defense, you're going to just let some guy go walking into your base and, take out your leader?
You're right. I mean, they teased it even. They made it seem like they were building up to this Grey Worm Jon Snow battle that just didn't ever happen. And yeah, you're like, I mean, okay, so the second to last episode ends with him killing her, Drogon flying off with the body. Okay, yeah, you knew Drogon wasn't going to kill Jon Snow. Okay. But again, we started with the final episode and Jon's just been in jail for this whole time. It's like, there's no way Grey Worm doesn't have a reaction when he finds out. And he's going to be one of the first ones to find out. So I just think it was a waste. I mean, that was my biggest disappointment, is that you were expecting this Jon Snow battle against somebody, and you had this build up and made it seem like it was going to be Grey Worm, and it really could have been in any way, shape, or form.
So it sounds to me like, as not just the finale, but the final season, what the word used was anticlimactic. Do you think that this show would be better binge watched all at once, marathon style, just as quick as you can ingest everything, so that it's not so anticlimactic? Or do you think that really just there's no way around it? You're going to watch through the first 7 seasons, be pumped, get to the 8th season, and feel a little let down by it.
Yeah, because it's just completely different pace through the rest of the seasons to when you get to this last season, and then you're just like light speed through this last season. So I don't know that, binge watching I think would help, but I don't know that it's going to take that noticeable difference away.
I think you'll enjoy it either way. I mean, even though it was rushed, I still enjoyed it because I love the show. As far as binge watching it, I mean, once you get like a few episodes in, you're going to want to binge watch it because it really starts to get good. It really starts to grow on you. And when you get to the end of season 1, like Dustin was saying, you think this one guy's the main character, and then he's gone. And then it's like, what's going to happen now, And for the next, 4 or 5 seasons, you're just locked in. And then once you're locked in, I mean, even with this ending being a little bit rushed, you're still excited. I still enjoyed it. I love the show. I wish they would have did it a little bit better. I think one of the most interesting things is like the first half of the show of the series was written probably by George Martin, right? And you see like how a really, really great writer writes a show. And then you get to the end and you got like some chumps that just kind of like come in and, okay, they're good at putting something together really quick, and they come in and just whip this together. And I mean, I think that's one of the best comparisons that I can make is you get this long, drawn out, beautiful story by George Martin, and you know this guy's a genius. And then you got like probably some like millennials that said, "Yo, look, we're gonna end this as quick as possible." And I heard that they're going on to write Star Wars. And Aaron Rodgers was interviewed, and Aaron Rodgers said he was disappointed with the ending too. Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, if anybody doesn't know, because this is a comic book show. But Aaron Rodgers was like, oh man, I just lost my train of thought. But Aaron Rodgers was disappointed with it too. I hope we've kind of convinced you a little bit, John, in checking this out. It's definitely worth it. You as a comic book fan, I think, would love it personally.
Yeah, I think we might have been a little harsh on some of our disappointments with the final season. But yeah, I mean, every other season before that was just epic, awesome, incredible stuff. And like I've said, I was satisfied with the way it wrapped up. Just wasn't satisfied with the pace and some of the nuances that were left out. But yeah, I mean, it's an epic story. If you can watch the series, great. If you're more into reading, the books are fantastic. Just be ready to wait, because you're gonna have to wait for, well, hopefully he finishes before he dies.
Well, that's actually one of the criticisms that I have heard recently, is that George Martin is actually not writing at the pace to complete all the books that are promised, which is that. With what you're saying about the story, it sounds like if somebody else takes over and doesn't have the same kind of care and passion for the story, if he doesn't finish it, it may be better left unfinished, which I'm not necessarily saying that's the case, but I know that we were talking beforehand, because I confessed to you guys that I'm not a watcher of the show, and you guys were asking if I'd ever watched shows that had endings that were not what you expected or what you hoped for. And the two that I can come up with now off the top of my head is Scrubs. They did a final season where they were doing basically a medical school, like back to medical school, and that was total garbage. Whenever I binge watch that on Netflix, when we get to them going back to school, we're starting over. We're not doing that silliness. I'm trying to think here. The other one was I just had it in my Heroes. You guys remember the NBC series Heroes? It was great for several seasons, and then something just happened, and they went off.
It was a similar circumstance where they were like, "Oh, we have to end this thing here pretty soon," and yeah, they kind of just went off the rails.
Yeah. I seriously stopped watching it halfway through the final season, because I'm like, I can't go there with you guys. I'm sorry. I suspended disbelief for all this other silliness, but I just can't go there. And so I don't know that I actually ever finished watching it, but then I started looking online at other stuff, at what people were saying, and I'm like, okay, I made the right call, because this is it got pretty trash there at the end. But anyway, I'm not saying that Game of Thrones is trash at all by any stretch of the imagination. Just a good ending for a story like that is paramount. When you look back at the cream of the crop for TV shows historically, you're not going to have anything like Game of Thrones, really, because it's pretty groundbreaking. But almost all of them have some type of fitting end to the story arc. So that's I'm glad to hear that if I binge watch it may be a little better as far as that goes. But yeah, that trying to cram 12 episodes into 6 or whatever, just that doesn't that doesn't sound like good planning. It would not surprise me if we found out a year or two later that somebody was a pain to work with, or that behind the scenes producers were wanting to move on to a different project, or fill in the blank, something drama was happening in real life that caused the shortness of the final season.
Yeah, they probably should have hired Chris Helmsworth. He wants to play Thor for the rest of his life, and I appreciate that. You know, you don't get actors like that wanting to play the same role, but Chris is an awesome Thor. So we're on the hour mark, and so we should probably wrap this one up. We had some great conversations about Spawn, Game of Thrones, talked about our comic book ventures. So any final thoughts from you, John, or Dustin? Well, why don't you go first, Dustin? Any final thoughts?
No, I just really like to thank you guys for inviting me on the show, talking a little bit about Rabid Rhino Comics. And I wanted to congratulate you, Todd, on your successful Kickstarter. That's very exciting.
Thanks, bro.
I'm looking forward to reading it.
I hope it lives up to the expectations. And if you need any information anytime, just hit me up. I mean, I learned a whole bunch of things. Some guys helped me, and it's better if we all share in the success, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Wake people up to the indie comics that are out there. I mean, if they're looking on Kickstarter, they might be looking at my comic, your comic, Antonio D's comic, Ron Zabala's comic. I mean, and so the more that we all work together and help each other, I mean, we're competitors, but we're friends, Yeah.
I mean, it's a great community. Obviously, I have a long history of indie support and doing. I've backed so many Kickstarters. It's ridiculous.
I know, me too.
But it's all good stuff, and it's all fun reads. And you wonder, as we look at some of the garbage that's put out by the big two, you wonder why aren't they reaching out to some of these new blood? And you've got opportunities out there if you just want to go look for them. So yeah, hopefully there's a lot of drumming up interest in indie comics, and especially these I'll say true independent comics. Like people want to lump Images as an independent, but they're still a big company that puts out big name books. So I think that there's a lot of talent out there, and that goes for artists and writers. So hopefully everyone finds some success.
I couldn't agree more. Really, for my final thoughts on the show today, I'm glad we got to talk some Spawn, and really, talking about Kickstarter, I believe that if Image was started up today, it would have been a Kickstarter. All of those guys would have been like, yeah, we're all cool together, but I'm going to do this Kickstarter thing. So, guys like you guys, both of you, Eric Van Scriber, Brian Polito, Antonio D, all of these guys that are out there, you guys too, blazing this trail. It's not going to go unnoticed by the large publishers. They're going to start taking notice of it. I personally think they already have, but I also think that they kind of realize that they have a monopoly when it comes to, the broader reach because of movies, those kind of things. That eventually, what are they going to be? Are they going to be movie studios? Or are they going to be comic book producers? If they want to be movie studios, that's fine. Go be movie studios. Leave the comic books to us. We will take care of them. That kind of thing. That's the way I feel about it. I'm going to talk directly to the listeners now. Of course, like, share, subscribe, tell somebody about the podcast, help us grow the podcast so that, so that we can continue to have guys like Dustin on here with us. We're an extension of, we are the nerd community. That's who we are. The way we know each other is all being together in the nerd community. So having said that, if you let us know what you want to talk about or what you want to hear us talk about, there's a good chance that it's going to show up on a future podcast. It may not be the entirety of the podcast, but we're going to include it in the podcast because we want to know what everybody else is looking for too. So definitely that's the best way you can support the podcast right now, is doing that and backing these Kickstarters when they show up. So that's my final thought.
All right. Well, we'll wrap this one up. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you've made it this far, we appreciate you. Take it easy, everybody, and have a good night.
Be good, guys.